a lot of people don't understand what the meaning of genocide is in international law, and really why should they. Attack on Gaza now is legitimate because it's a response to the Hamas mass murder on 7th of October, and it's their right to self-defense, right? Mm-hmm. Well, according to international law, Israel does not actually have a right to self-defense in occupied territory, right? No, that right, according to international law, doesn't exist. That's important to mention this. Now, does Israel have a right and actually a duty and a responsibility to repel the attack against it? Absolutely, right? But to respond in a genocidal assault, right, against Gaza, as it has since 7th of October, no. And it doesn't, not even the right to self-defense as we know it between states, because Gaza is occupied territory. Right, so that's one thing
which people don't realize. Under international law, Gaza remains under occupation and has done despite the Israeli army withdrawing in 2005.
Absolutely, because Israel controls the border; it controls what goes in and out for 16 years now. This is the longest siege, by the way, in modern history. So, indeed, a very different situation than the Russian-Ukraine war, right? But not a difference that would suggest that Russia's attack is genocide, whereas Israel's attack is legitimate self-defense. Not at all, actually, right? In that sense. But again, this does not minimize, right, the horrendous levels of violence of the unprovoked Russian attack on Ukraine. It just means that the idea that we have two states here, that is Russia and Ukraine, and here a state attacking a territory that it occupies for decades and has laid a siege on for 16 years, yes, we can definitely talk about a genocidal assault here, even though we had indeed a horrendous attack by Hamas on 7th of October. That does not mean that Israel's response cannot be genocidal.
In terms of intent and incitement, I just want to check something in terms of maybe where lines are blurred. So Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister, if he invokes Amalek in the Bible, which calls for the killing of men, women, and children and livestock, intent. The Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, the Israeli Parliament, all the preoccupation with whether or not there is internet in Gaza, showing that we've learned nothing, we are too humane, burn Gaza now or less. That would be incitement, wouldn't it? Because he's a senior politician, but he's not in government. I was just wondering then where these would fall, because you've got former senior military figures, but they're not in the Israeli military, but maybe they're indicative of Israeli military thinking. So the former top attorney general of the military said, if you want to destroy Hamas, then you have to destroy Gaza, because everything in Gaza, almost every building there is a stronghold for Hamas. Whilst another general, former general, the former head of the Israeli National Security Council, Major General Giora Eiland, said that Israel should not shy away from the spread of epidemics and humanitarian disasters in occupied Gaza to reach victory faster. So where does all that fall, basically?
Yeah, so we have to understand that incitement is a separate crime under the UN Genocide Convention. So when we talk about intent and the dynamics of violence, that's Article 2 of the Convention. And when we talk about incitement, we're talking about crime under Article 3. It's a separate crime. And it also means, by the way, that people could be held responsible to incitement, even if genocide doesn't follow, right? But certainly if genocide does follow, and especially when incitement happens during the dynamics of violence, as we've seen. You've mentioned Major General Giora Eiland, who was the former head of the Israel National Security Council, yesterday in a thoroughly genocidal piece in the large Israeli daily Yediot Ahronoth, right, where again, basically reproducing this idea that all the people in Gaza are legitimate enemies, right? Again, half of them are under the age of 18. I want to remind everyone. And also something that I think has been overlooked in Eiland's article yesterday, again, referring to the Palestinians in Gaza as Nazis, basically, right? Comparing the situation to Nazi Germany at the end of World War II. So indeed, these kinds of articles, when we have from the 7th of October, Israeli members of parliament who are calling basically for a second Nakba, quote unquote, and here we're talking about, of course, the Nakba is the destruction of Palestinian society in the 1948 war and the creation of the State of Israel, the mass deportations of 750,000 Palestinians and the destruction of hundreds of their villages. And now we're seeing, again, explicit calls for a second Nakba, which is indeed taking place in front of our eyes in Gaza, right? The forced displacement of more than 1.5 million Palestinians from north to south Gaza. And now, by the way, Israel, important to say, is also bombing the southern part of Gaza, where it told Palestinians to move for their safety, right? So no place is safe in Gaza. But we're also seeing from day one, from the 7th of October, Israeli journalists, senior Israeli journalists, TV anchors, in articles on TV calling to flatten Gaza, to turn Gaza into, quote, a slaughterhouse, to kill everyone in Gaza, calling for 1 million bodies, quote unquote, and so on and so forth. Many, again, dozens of these pieces of evidence. And these are, shamelessly, right, on social media, again, on TV and newspaper articles, and they're ongoing, right? They're still 6 weeks into, and we still see these proclamations. These are not intent to destroy because they're not people with command authority, but they definitely fall under incitement. And I want to remind everyone that in the Rwanda genocide, in the post-war trials, post-genocide trials, journalists stood trial in the media case for incitement to genocide as the genocide was going on there in the case of radio and newspapers. So we definitely see this, and this adds to this annihilatory atmosphere, basically. And again, it's anyone who follows, Hebrew language sources, the Israeli public spaces and social media and media are just filled with annihilatory and destructive language. It's really, really shocking.